Hi everyone, welcome along to DigiShift 60. So today's focus is going to be on the 2022 Charity Digital Skills Report, and we're going to be joined from Nissa, Ramsay and McLeod. Unfortunately, Zoe Amara can't make it today. She's been ill. The Digital Skills Report, if you've not seen it before, is the annual barometer of digital skills, attitude and support needs across the sector. And we're hoping that this DigiShift is going to give you a better understanding of some of the insights and areas that are going to be critical success factors for digital progress in your organisation. So things like understanding users, leadership, governance and strategy. And we're going to start with Nissa's going to give an overview of the latest report. And one of the things I'd like to be thinking about is how can the report become a tool internally? And I've seen it used really well at board level and also senior management level as a way of sense checking where your organisation's at and where you need to get to. So I'm going to hand over to Nissa just now and then we'll hear from Catherine.
Hi all, thanks for having me today. Zoe is really sorry she can't be here. She loves doing these sessions. She has just picked up COVID and is struggling. So you just have to bear with me. I usually work behind the scenes every year on the Charities Digital Skills Report. I'm the one who helps do all the user testing and develops the questions and does the analysis. So I might have less opinionated ideas to share about what you should do, but I've taken lots of her ideas and I'll go through some kind of key highlights. We've only got 10 minutes and I'm really keen to hear from all of you about, just your questions, what you'd love to hear more about next year, what doesn't make sense, what does for you, so we can learn from it. So I'll be working on the next iteration of the survey soon. I should share my screen and we can share the presentation with you afterwards. But everything we have for the report and all the kind of slides and everything is all on the website for the Charity Digital Skills Report, which launched recently. So I'll share the link to that in a bit as well. Am I sharing a slideshow with you of sorts, or is it very small?
You were. It's got back to the screen now. I think when you're on slideshow, it's working fine.
I'm really pleased I wrote my notes on the Google Docs so that I can't read them when I do a slideshow. What is it big enough for everyone to see?
Yeah, I think if you just click slideshow, that should be as good to go.
Yeah, I need my notes. Sorry.
No, that's all right. It's fine. Just go.
Sorry. Can someone can you put the link in the chat, Ross, so people can open it if they want to see it better?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, but we can. I mean, it's a decent size. We can see it fine.
Lovely. So Charity Digital Skills Report, we run it every year. This is the 5th year. It might have been the 6th actually. And we had 435 organisations respond, which is just amazing. And thank you to anyone and everyone here who filled it in, promoted it, had a read, had a look. It really means a lot to us. It's just a small team of us running it. It's mainly myself and Zoe, and then we have some social media and design support as well to make it look fancy. But it's been done on a shoestring until now. And we're really happy that we had a really big range of organisations take part this year, particularly like starting at early stage in digital and half felt they were advancing, and lots of small charities as well, thanks to support from the Clothworkers Foundation for some extra incentive payments and to Catalyst for really supporting us with this. We also had Digital Wonder Lab and Enhance sponsor the report as well, so that really helps. And if anyone has any questions later about who took part, please let me know. Our goal for next year is to increase our responses across Northern Ireland and Wales, so particularly as well as Scotland. So if you have ideas on that, we'd love to hear them too. And let's jump into the findings. So there are kind of 3 main trends, I think, this year to highlight. Firstly, that digital services are really common, but not the norm across this space, with 3/4 of charities now delivering digital services of those who responded to a digital skills survey. So we understand the bias there, but of everyone who responded. This year we asked for the first time about mode of delivery, which is super interesting. So we found that 60% were using third-party platforms like Zoom, Facebook, and interestingly, nearly 1/4 are developing their own kind of software tools and solutions. And when you look at charities with an income of over £1 million, this increases to 1/3. The other kind of really big trend we're seeing is the hybrid working, obviously, and 62% have working arrangements for hybrid working, and only 1 in 10 say they're going to fully return to the office. We'll be asking a bit more about that next year to see if that does stick. And again, I think it's slightly higher for proportions for larger organisations than small. Moving forwards, actually we ask about digital strategy every year and the numbers don't change much. And similarly this year, about just over half have a digital strategy in place. But what we are seeing is that it's almost like an increasing interest in kind of moving the organisation forward with digital, with 3/4 planning to make some kind of progress, even if it doesn't relate to their strategy per se, and 40% saying that creating a strategy is really important to them. And yeah, I'll be really, I'm really intrigued to see how the squeeze on everyone's finances and the cost of living increases and the increase in demand kind of affects that next year, because I do think it will change. For the 4th year running, Charities would most like their CEO and board to provide a clear vision of what digital could help them achieve. So 58% said that was a really important change that was needed. 40% would like their leaders to have skills to develop and embed a good digital strategy. And when we asked about boards and trustees, only 1 in 5 felt their boards gave them that kind of buy-in and support for digital. And yet half didn't really know if there were any plans to increase digital skills. Or sorry, they don't have plans to increase their digital skills, or they don't know what their plans are. It's just kind of a really interesting question, is whether or not people are seeing a skills gap and just bringing in the person who is then, oh, you're the digital expert, or whether they are looking more generally at upskilling. So yeah, it'd be great for everyone here to think a bit more about kind of what are your ambitions for digital? How can it make a difference? Can you say, hand on heart, even if you don't have a strategy written down on a very formal document, like everyone kind of gets what the point is and what the plans are and so on. The skills and gaps, again, relatively consistent each year. Top 5 skills, actually the basic digital skills have increased. I can't remember the exact change, but over 80% rated themselves as excellent or fair. So we've seen that really big shift onto using like emails and video calling and digital for remote working, and other skills which are relatively higher. GDPR compliance, as everyone's quite like okay with that, and social media and understanding of digital and how to apply it. But there were kind of big skills gaps that were noted around digital fundraising and analysing data to plan services. That came out as a big finding in 2021 as well, that data is an area where data about services, service users, out for funding, for outcomes, mapping, for predictive modelling and so on. These are a big area of interest for lots of organisations, and something that that kind of everyone can kind of see needs work linked to digital. Other skills gaps includes using SEO, and undertaking user research was really low as well, which we're always slightly worried about, because we kind of want organisations that are using digital to really be understanding the needs of their users and how they're experiencing those services. So another thing I thought you'd be interested in is trends for small charities, and the good news is that 2/3 are planning to make progress with digital. More than 50% told us their top priorities were improving their website and their digital presence and social media, developing digital fundraising, and more importantly, like there's a lot of interest in how to build skills amongst staff and volunteers, which is really crucial. Because these are obviously small charities can't just bring in someone whose only role is digital. Kind of everyone needs to be doing a bit of everything. A key challenge that we're hearing is finding the funding to invest in infrastructure, software and devices to keep up with that, kind of getting first laptops. getting websites in place, that sort of thing, getting everyone on their right mobile phones. This was felt by 47% of the small charities we spoke to. And it shows how, as a sector, we're going to really need to step up and support this sort of change. And finally, 44% of small charities, which I really should have put my glasses, told us they really want to get funding to train up staff and volunteers. So they're really not able to kind of prioritise doing that because, I guess, of demand being high and just needing to get on with the day-to-day job. So any way to kind of share skills or mentoring, or even kind of how problems are being solved, or if you're a small charity and you've made some progress in, for instance, like choosing a new tool that you use that's really helped you, like being able to share those skills with other organisations who are struggling with the same questions could be really helpful. Obviously, the picture for large charities with an income of over $1 million is very different, much further ahead in terms of those who have a strategy in place. Nearly 80% have recruited digital roles this year. And it's becoming more and more important for people who work for large charities to work for an organisation that is actively developing digital skills and capabilities. However, what's really interesting is the same kind of priorities remain, like how to get more from our data, how to improve our brand and presence and profile online, and how to deliver our strategy more effectively are key priorities. And equally, they would most value funding to have that time to develop their digital approach or strategy. And I suspect that time might also involve bringing people in externally, or just to facilitate how they want to do that as a team. And core digital staff are a big challenge for funding those as well. And data skills are still recognised as a gap. So it's, what's interesting is there are some similar patterns, even though they're obviously in very different places. I think we tried to kind of develop some calls to action for charities, which might be worth you thinking about here. For those who are pretty early stage with digital, exploring opportunities for hybrid working. A stat I didn't kind of focus on earlier was lots of organisations are still struggling with well-being and remote working, and also just the logistics of having some people in a meeting in the office and some people out of an office, bringing everyone together in different ways. How to kind of manage hybrid working effectively is still an ongoing concern. And exploring opportunities for how best to deliver services using a kind of blended model of online and offline support is a really positive thing. Upskilling yourself in user research is a really key recommendation. There's some resources we can all share in the chat after this. And reflecting on what success looks like, even if it's just half an hour in the next team meeting, kind of coming together around what's gone really well over the pandemic and what you want to keep, and has everything been abandoned and why, and what could change next could be really, really valuable. Again, sorry, some of these relate to data I haven't shared, but it's all in the main report. But for those developing digital tools and services, diversity and inclusion, both within the teams developing those products and services, as well as those involved in user testing, was shown as a bit of a gap. And accessibility was, again, something that the people filling in the survey felt like they could do better on. So having a look at what that could mean for you is really important. We felt like there could be a lot more collaboration with other organisations on digital, particularly with stretched resources and stretched teams, and that isn't really happening as much as it could be across the sector, appreciating funding and lack of time and competitiveness and so on. But there are areas where it could help lots of organisations move forward together. So thinking about, are there very like-minded organisations for data sharing or for cross-referral, or just generally learning together around digital where you could save resources would be a really valuable use of time. Reviewing digital skills on your board will be really important for those who really see digital as kind of forefront and centre to their delivery. It will really help you. So that might mean upskilling everyone, or it might mean finding a digital trustee, or just getting everyone's buy-in, really. No one needs to be an expert per se, but everyone needs to be curious and asking the right questions and getting advice when it's needed from outside of that context. And then finally, kind of looking at your data skills and how you're using data across the organization is pretty fundamental to understanding how people are using digital services and what's needed, as well as kind of monitoring usage and tracking progress and reporting back and accessing funding. And finally, CEOs of large charities, there was a bit of a gap around budgeting skills for digital projects and transformations. That would be really interesting to look at as well. These are the links. I'll share them in the chat in a second. We've got a website and the report's available as a PDF, but also you can go through the website and just read it online. And you can also download all of our data, and there's lots of links to resources for support, linked to some of the findings. And please sign up to the mailing list. We'll let you know about the next report and how to take part in the survey and how to share it. And finally, I have a feedback form, so you can tell us anything that you love or hate about the survey or the report itself, and we'll use that to inform what we ask next year. Ooh, I made it through.
That was really good, Nissa. Thank you. That was excellent.
Thank you for listening to the waffle. It's been a little while since I focused on this report.
I'm kind of hoping we're going to hear from Catherine in a wee second, but I guess for everyone to think about which of those statistics really resonate for you, and how do they reflect some of the conversations you may be having internally, or perhaps more importantly, some of the conversations that people find difficult and aren't having. I think for me, that's where I've found the digital skills report particularly useful this year. It's been a really good catalyst to have conversations that people have been avoiding for quite a long time around particularly things like leadership and governance and culture. I think the link is broken, George said. I'll put another link in the chat if I'm now stuck the wrong link in a wee second. Right, we're going to hear from Catherine, then we'll get a chance for discussion and Q&A. So Catherine McLeod, MBE, is the Chief Executive of Dingley's Promise, an organisation working to transform early years for children with SEND. She'll talk a wee bit more about that, I'm sure. She's going to be talking about their digital transformation journey, and I think particularly where this is important, why we invited Catherine, is so many people in this room are coming from a small to medium charity background, and actually I personally find that sometimes the kind of bigger organisations' digital transformation journeys aren't that helpful because it involves big digital teams and colossal budgets, but actually hearing from the perspective of a smaller organisation can be much more powerful. So I'll hand over to Catherine just now.
Thank you, Ross. So yeah, it's I just have to say, first of all, I'm not saying we've got everything right and we're experts, but this is our experience, and certainly we have gone through quite a lot of digital transformation. So I'm going to very briefly mention COVID and that as a catalyst for change, and then onto the ongoing developments, and finally sort of our lessons learned as a small charity. So who are we? We are a small charity. Our work on the ground is based in Berkshire at the moment. We have 3 specialist early years settings supporting children with special educational needs and disabilities. So we reach around 300 families directly, but we also have a really large training and lobbying programme, which is national. Our turnover is under 1 million, so we are considered one of the small charities, and we have about 40 staff. So I think probably like a lot of people, during COVID, things changed massively. As you've heard, so we run settings, so our staff can't suddenly go remote in the main. So we can't do remote working for everybody. However, we did move people around, and we did establish a whole online system during COVID, including cloud logs, and obviously we were using Zoom for meetings, check-ins, wellbeing support online as well, employees assistance program online. So we developed a lot to really support staff wellbeing and sort of help them to move over into a more remote way of working. For our children, we also established online sessions for children to sort of give some continuity to them, because it was really important for them during COVID, but obviously as soon as they could, they came back because nursery settings were open for pretty much the whole of the pandemic. So that was a relatively short period for us. However, there was a huge push around our social media presence and making sure there were resources that we were creating online for families. So we use those directly sent to families, but also we put them on our social media channels. We really started to use those channels as an extra support service for the people that we work with. And then finally, our training, and this is the most dramatic for sure of all of the things that we did. So before COVID, our training was a 4-month-long online program. So we were using Zoom before COVID, which is very rare, I think. So we knew what it was. However, we adapted our training and made it a short course as opposed to a 4-month-long accredited course. And we then offered it for free to the sector. And in 6 weeks, we had 737 sign-ups across England to do the training, which, considering we are at that point, we weren't national, we were very much a charity based in Berkshire, was absolutely huge. So the impact of the digital services we developed over lockdown, certainly staff developed a lot of new skills, saw that a lot of things were possible, felt really confident about working digitally. And those connections for wellbeing also worked. So in our annual survey, 97.5% of staff said that they felt really supported by the digital things that were put in place, which was really, really useful. For children, they continue to learn throughout the lockdown, and certainly their development levels suffered very much less than the national levels for children with SEND. And we think that was a key part of it. Families were incredibly resilient, and 60% of them said it was only us that had any contact with them during part of that period in the first full lockdown. So again, the fact that we could very quickly move to digital was really useful. We were up on digital in under 2 weeks. We managed to set it all up and get it working. So that was really key for them, because of course the actual lockdown for our families was quite short. And then trainees. So before COVID, we had reached 40 trainees in a year. And after COVID, in that year, we reached 1,137. So a slight increase. So which I just think that the whole thing very much for us was a huge catalyst. And I think for all of us, it probably was, because not only do staff suddenly think, actually, I can do that, which was a huge barrier for us. We work with early years practitioners who get into their job because they love children, they want to support children, they don't get into it to be sitting at a computer. And so that was a huge change that has facilitated what's happened next. But also, I think it really showed how families and the people we work with can engage online as well. I'll go through this a bit more, what's happened next. So strategy-wise, we prioritise getting a digital trustee, who we now have, who's embedded on the board. And I've been lucky in that I gave a lot of ongoing information to our board and have had buy-in for supporting digital as a core part of our organisation. We made the decision not to have a separate digital strategy, and digital runs through our main 5-year strategy that we've just updated. That may change in the future, but at the moment that's working for us. So that's how we're doing it. And our digital trustee is very active whenever we're having strategic conversations to make sure that digital is part of those. Profile. So our social media channels have really grown post-COVID. And we're very careful about what we post on each channel, who the users of each channel are, something that we weren't really doing before. We just sent everything out to everywhere. So we're really focused on that now. We have upgraded our website. We use a lot of forms now, automatic forms, so reducing the amount of work we have to do around digital and making sure that things are automated instead. We do use paid ads. We've currently got a project on search engine optimization, so we're trying to really optimize that online as well. And we're also looking into and finally establishing, sort of using that Google Ads grant that charities can get. So that's something else that we're doing at the moment. With delivery, our training and consulting has continued to increase. We now have a contract to deliver 30,000 places in the next 4 years. So that is now, what's really interesting is that's now a core part of our organisation. and it's grown to be equally as important as the other parts of what we do. And that's purely because of the fact that we can deliver online. With regard to data, we've moved our KPIs from Excel, which was tough for everybody. It caused a lot of tears when people were trying to use formulas and it didn't work, and then they felt they'd messed it up. So that was really, really difficult for our staff. And so we've now moved that over to using a CRM system, and we got it adapted so that it would also feed into Power BI. So that will help us with our data to see patterns and to plan much better. And then finally, around collaboration. So we're a member of the Digital Services Consortium, which is a national consortium for organisations that work with children with disabilities. And that's really helped us because we made a decision that we're going to collaborate up. So because we are a relatively small organisation, what I was trying to do, and again, with COVID and with everything being more online, I could attend national meetings that I wouldn't normally have access to. And so what we've decided to do is to partner up. So when I'm in those meetings, usually all the organisations around me are probably 10 times the size, 20 times the size of us. However, we can benefit from their knowledge and their experience. And also now we're also benefiting from partnering because they have massive resources to do fundraising for digital projects. And as a partner, they do the fundraising and we then deliver with them, but we don't then have that pressure on our fundraising team to do the fundraising for it. So that's been really, really useful for us. Very quickly, finally, because I'm over time, lessons learned. I think one thing that's really important is more sophisticated systems do not mean necessarily more digital skills for teams. So what we tried to do, and of course, training is vital for teams and digital skills, but what we've tried to do, and I give the example of the Excel spreadsheets going into Power BI, we've now got a system where what they do is much more simple and they can input data at any point on a phone anywhere, and it is literally just inputting data. They don't need to do any calculations. And actually they're finding it much more simple, although the system itself is much more sophisticated than it used to be. So again, for us, it's been about making sure that in investing in more, it doesn't make it more complicated for our teams on the ground. Yeah, it takes a lot of time. So a lot of our developments, we're thinking, yeah, that'll be in about 3 months. That'll be fantastic. And sort of, 9 months later, we're still going, right, we've got to embed that in all of our systems. So yeah, bottom line, it takes a lot of time. Quality of online support work is lower. So for us, we found that although online for the families we work with was really useful when they couldn't access anything else, certainly they felt they wanted to go back to face-to-face for support. And our support workers also said the quality of what they would talk about was better face-to-face again. So that's something we don't do so much of the online support anymore. If it's needed, we do, but it's gone down a lot. Ask. So a lot of organisations say, well, there's no funding for that, and I can't get that, especially small organisations. But actually, all of the developments that we've got are little tag-ons that we've put on larger projects, and just saying, well, if we're going to do that project, we need that. So it's just about in your head, always thinking, hang on, could I get some funding to improve our digital activities? And certainly, it doesn't sound sexy to talk about I'm changing the data from one system to another, but actually when we started talking it up, because it is important, and talking it up around how much more robust our numbers are and how good our monitoring and evaluation will be, then we started getting funding for those things as well. And finally, just around that, utilising online to increase influence. As I said, we were definitely a local charity before COVID. We're now a national charity. And part of that's the training offer, but also it's very much about the fact that we could go into groups and talk with bigger, more important organisations. I shouldn't say more important, but I am. But organisations that people listen to, we became their colleagues because we had that online work. And so I think that's just really important. That's certainly a lesson that we learned, that they were really open to being our partner, but we just, because we're outside of London and we're much smaller, we didn't think we'd be welcome in that space. So that's a whistle-stop tour, and it was too long, but I hope that was of use.
That's amazing, Catherine. Thank you. There's so many amazing things that you've achieved in what seems like a very short space of time. There's some really good questions coming through the chat that we're going to pick up as well. I think particularly just that piece of advice that don't see digital funding as a separate thing, that actually it needs to become part of core costs. So when you're putting that application into lottery, what's that element of digital that needs to be part of it? And that might be the building blocks of development that allow you to build a new CRM, a new website, or a new digital service. But that doesn't need to be a one-off cost that you suddenly need to get a massive investment for. So I think that's really, really solid advice. Nissa had a question, which I think a few people had kind of +1 and said they'd like to know more, which was around the training for staff, and particularly how you got staff confident around using digital, and just what that looked like in practical terms.
To be honest, because we were all remote, there wasn't really any sort of magic wand. It was much more about just being really, really accessible all the time. So everybody was accessible online, introducing things relatively slowly, from the point of view of if we had to change anything, it was slow, but there was always consultation around it. So we were having those really, really regular meetings, and it was talking people through a lot, because just giving them a system and saying, here's all the information and you can do some online training or whatever, that didn't really work for us. It had to be all based on feeling that they were supported and they weren't left on their own. So it was sort of ongoing dripped discussion and support, as opposed to particular training to get people on the same page. And certainly finally, after a few months, it was people who literally had said, I will not even touch a computer, who were saying, I've got the Zoom session happening and I feel fantastic about it. And really, and some of them were quite emotional, because certainly some of the older staff as well, I think it's something they thought, I'm just never going to have to think about it. And so it was intimidating at first, but we just had to be there as people and listen to any concerns they had.
Brilliant, thanks, Catherine. And it probably ties in actually. Iona, I don't know if you're still on the call, but talking about your role as a digital skills coach for Aberdeen Foyer. I don't know, so a few people kind of followed up wanting to hear a wee bit more about that. Are you comfortable sharing any kind of advice or top tips you've got in terms of building digital?
Yeah, I don't actually have a huge amount of advice yet, because I've only kind of just started. I'm 4 weeks in, but I found this online and I thought it was really interesting. And what you're saying about what you've been doing at Dingley's Promise is exactly what I want to implement here. And initially, kind of being at Aberdeen Foyer, I'm already seeing such a massive scope of people who just won't go near a laptop and won't take the time to do the training and to get themselves sorted. And there are things available already that the IT guys put in place, but it's going to be that approach of it needs to be one-to-one availability, just helping ad hoc and when, which is hard to do over a very wide geographical area that we're in. But yeah, no huge amounts of advice, but very keen to touch base with other people and keep in touch if anybody wants to.
Brilliant, thanks, Iona. Yeah, and just say there's some good stuff on the SCDO website around digital champions work. There's also a really nice tool which I've used quite a few charities now around digital skills assessment, and particularly digital skills for the workplace. And that's quite a nice tool if you're trying to assess a kind of baseline of basic digital skills in the workplace across a broad staff team. That can be a really powerful way of doing that. Pauline, you had a question. I don't know if you want to jump on around the kind of digital playbook idea, which I quite like.
Sorry, what did you say, Ross?
You had a question about digital playbook.
Yeah, I was wondering, Catherine, obviously, I just want to download everything you've done. Did you keep a log of implementation that other people could benefit from? Because you seem to have been very generous with your sharing so far. So I'm hoping that you have, something written down that we can build on.
That would have been really good.
I've started a new role. Yes. Yeah, I've just started a new role across Birmingham and with a lot of volunteer organisations, and they're going to be at similar stages that you were at, and it'd be good to just be able to say to them, there are resources out there. I know there are other resources, but what you've done sounds like amazing.
Do you know what? It's one of those things that I think to myself, I really should do that when I've got the time. And actually, maybe you asking will force me to actually say, sit down, write it all down, get it on paper. So maybe I'll promise you that I will do that. I'll put it on my list.
Love it.
You should
Thanks, Catherine.
hopefully, I mean, what I advise people is to put things in calendar and stuff they could just pick up again that they've done, you know, because we do forget, you know, documentation of projects like this is easy to forget, but it's such a critical thing. So yeah, please. And anything I can help with, please ask me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Ross.
I think just even, you know, even on a kind of basic level today, being able to hear, like, here's a small charity that's been able to implement these things, and here's the building blocks and the work streams. Because for a lot of people, digital still feels overwhelming, or they're still in that kind of very reactive mode that they kind of got into during COVID. I think the other thing that I found really heartening listening to you speak there, Catherine, was the fact that some people think that by writing everything down in a strategy that somehow everything's going to be okay in the future, and we know that's not really how things work, and particularly in the third sector, and particularly given what's happening in the UK at the moment, that things are shifting so rapidly, that actually making this a core part of your organisational strategy is critical for it to work, and a core part of how you apply for funding as well. I was quite interested in your digital trustee. Have you able to share maybe a wee bit about kind of who you recruited and why you chose them, and kind of what they brought to the table?
So we specifically advertised for a digital trustee because it was something that the board agreed was a priority. The person that we chose, I think the reason that we chose him is because he had a bit of both. He certainly had strategy, but he also had practical knowledge. And for us, one of the biggest issues that we were having was we would look at something we wanted to do digitally, and no one on the board or me was able to read a proposal from a provider and say, oh, that's exactly what we want. That looks perfect. I wouldn't have a clue. A lot of these proposals I looked at and I thought, I don't know if they're just trying to make money out of us. I don't know if this is what we should be looking for. And I think that was our biggest worry. It's not having that person on the board who can read it and go, oh, they're talking out of their behind. That's not what you want to do. Because digital is so big, the whole digital thing, that we just didn't know what were the right things to be doing, and what strategy to take. So I think some of the things we did in the beginning were things that actually, had we had that person earlier who would have said, that's probably not going to work for you, we wouldn't have done. So that was certainly the key role that we wanted. And that's why we sort of went for somebody who has strategic as well as practical knowledge.
Thanks, Catherine. Shameless plug again, but our digital trustees events that are part of the Catalyst network, which also supports DigiShift as well, and also supports the Charity Digital Skills Report. So we run monthly matchmaking events where we bring together people working in the third sector who want digital expertise in the board with people who work in the technology sector who want to be in a governance role. So our next one, we've got one on the 25th of October, and then we've got one in November and one in December happening as well. And they're free to attend, 60 minutes long. Any other questions? People can just unmute and jump on, or pop them in the chat. Is there anything else people want to ask? We've got 15 minutes left, so we've got plenty of time. Siobhan, do you want to come?
Yeah, kind of delving further into what Catherine just talked about of the digital strategy and the trustee helping there. I was shocked by Nissa's stat that 21% of charities are developing their own solutions rather than kind of using off the shelf. I wonder if Catherine could talk a bit more about that. Did you go with just off the shelf solutions? Did that save you time? Did that help you? Have you done anything more bespoke?
Yeah, we've gone all off the shelf. And actually, in reality, there's a lot of free or really reduced resources that people have spent time to develop. They'll give them cheaper to charities. And so we spent a lot of time researching what are the things that are already available. There was a point that we were looking at developing our own app. But again, I think when we looked at the resources that would need to go into that at the time, and not even knowing if it would be successful, I think in the end, we just said, you know what, that is too big for us. And so, yeah, we've totally relied on other people's systems. I suppose the only real tailoring of anything is our CRM system, because actually that CRM system isn't created to have Power BI stuck onto it, but we spoke to the organisation, and then we spoke to the consultants that usually deliver that CRM to partners, and they agreed that they would work. So there was a system in place that it could track our KPIs, because actually it is a traditional CRM system, you know, a database of contacts. And so they've developed it further. That's the only part I could say that we have, you know, looked at our own bespoke model. But again, it was delivered by experts elsewhere. We certainly couldn't have done anything like that ourselves.
I might have missed it, Catherine, but did you cover which CRM you'd chosen? Because I know Pauline had asked a question about that in the chat.
It was Donify.
All right, okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
cloud-based tool,
Yeah.
excellent, okay, cool. Yeah, there's a really good charity catalogue. I've got a really good kind of roundup of all the CRM solutions that are kind of like discounted or free for charities. I think again, this goes back to like Catherine's point about having the right person on the board to scrutinise this stuff. And I think often in the sector there's a very quick reaction to go, we need a bespoke thing built, and we're going to go and get a big dynamic system or Salesforce. And for some charities, that's absolutely what they need. For a lot of smaller organisations, a cloud-based off-the-shelf tool is going to be much, much more suitable and much more sustainable. Pauline's put some other ones in there, like Beacon and Good CRM as well. I guess we're not here to necessarily endorse something specific, but just that idea that either you're going to choose a charity specific one or one of the ones that's going to be able to give you a sizable discount. The problem with some of the ones like Salesforce and like Dynamics is the cost is not really in the licenses. The cost is in development time and 6 members of staff taking 3 months out to make this thing actually work, and then probably retrofitting a bunch of stuff into it. And people often underestimating the internal cost of making these things happen.
I just quickly say, I think Salesforce captured a lot of charities, but again, it was a system where they say have it for free, it's fabulous, you'll love it, but then they have to put in all the resource. Yeah, big thumbs down from Pauline. They have to put in all the resource to develop it to how they want to use it. So again, that was one of those I know a lot of people got burnt by, because they then realized it was better to go for a CRM that was already set up for charity use.
Yeah, I think this comes back to that idea, like what Siobhan mentioned about reuse within the sector. So, I know like a few grant makers use Salesforce for their kind of grant making pipeline from like application to reporting. And actually what we need to see more of is if someone's doing that and it's basically the same setup in 7 other organizations, how can those 7 other organizations get access to that setup and deploy it much more quickly? And that doesn't just apply to CRMs, but like anything that people are doing, like Catherine mentioned there about an app, seems like a great idea. Get the build cost, we'll go to a funder and we'll get £40,000 to build it. How do you maintain it when there's a new version of iOS or Android that comes out? How do you keep it safe for your users every year? Like these ongoing costs and commitment and in-house capacity that just aren't there in most charities. Yeah, some really good stuff coming in the chat as well, which people can keep an eye on. Right, any other questions people have got or comments, either for Nissa or for Catherine?
Sorry, Ross, just to jump in, but people are asking about whether there's a platform or space where we can all find out about things. So just giving a plug for the Third Sector Geeks WhatsApp group, but there's other Slack groups and other spaces and Digital Champions, Digital Unite and so on. So, and other people have said things too.
Yeah, and also thinking about, I guess, what does a network mean to you? So these DigiShift calls are set up as a kind of collective community call where we bring best practice and people can share and talk to each other. But yeah, the Digital Champions Slack that SCBO have got is really good for that type of work. Cool. And again, if there's any other ones, just pop them in the chat box and we can pick up on those. Grand. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Any for Nissa as well? Kind of a digital skills report.
I had one, a personal question, that's not quite what I meant, more of a one around Scotland. Is that around, did you have, or what were the numbers like for Scotland this year? Was there a greater input from Scotland? Was it lesser? Because I know sometimes it's always been a challenge getting
information from Scotland, so I wondered if you'd had any better uptake this year.
I would say
And-
Scotland's quite good on numbers
Well, it's
actually
good.
in replying normally, but it has gone down this year. So we had 30,
Okay.
which is normally our cutoff for like, because we really wanted to publish country specific data and you need 30 responses, but because the questions are so detailed, you can't be like 50% and then you start looking at, look, that's like 6 people like said this for this question. So you do need the numbers to make the data meaningful. I'm not trying to hide any data, I just don't want to mislead anyone saying it's representative of anything. So yes, the numbers weren't amazing this year. They're normally better. And I can't quite put my finger on why that is. Maybe it looks a bit too good, like in terms, maybe looks a bit, I don't know, obviously like no one knows me outside of my very small circle, and with Zoe I'm our digital, and we've got like funding from some corporates, and maybe it just all looks a bit too professional, isn't quite linking in. Yeah, I don't know, maybe it was the timing. Other surveys and other initiatives are going on as well, like obviously we're not by the Scottish sector for the Scottish sector, it could be that. Yeah, but it's always better than Wales and Northern Ireland where we struggle even more. But Wales have just had their own survey of digital skills as well. And we sort of connected and touched base and shared questions, but the timing was just a bit unfortunate in the end. Yeah, so I would welcome any feedback if you've ever looked at it and thought, nah, it's not for me, or can't be bothered with that jazz. Or
I think there's maybe something wider around us as organisations helping perhaps to promote it better, I think maybe.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping to do this year actually, and maybe even change the look and feel of it and kind of white label it in to an extent in some way. So if you've got ideas on that, we're obviously working with SCVO, and we're just kind of brainstorming at the moment. So yeah, we'd love to hear it because it's really important. We can't just say that this huge group of London charities who respond are really setting the tone for the rest of the country. So we do want to make sure we're offering more incentives this year. We're going to be doing more user testing with smaller groups and more diverse groups, and we're getting some advice on that as well. So yeah, would love to hear all of your ideas. I've got a feedback survey actually, so if you do have anything you want to share kind of confidentially or ideas, you can get in touch with us. That'd be really great to hear from everyone else. I just had a random thought to share with everyone. I interview a lot of charities about where they are with either digital or data. I'm doing a project with Superhighways at the moment, and it's super interesting because I always ask people, like, where do you go, like when you are stuck on something and you have a problem to solve? Who do you ask? Like, where, do you go online? Do you go and talk to your someone you worked with in a previous job, or another charity down the road who does the same thing as you? Where do you go? And I found that a lot of the organisations I'm speaking to recently are in quite strong networks of organisations who deliver similar things to them in different boroughs in London, for example. And they do have these kind of close peers, and they're talking about their area, but they're not making space or time to talk about the problems they're actually trying to solve, which is like, should I use Google Form or Typeform or Microsoft Forms? Should I be worried about people entering personal data into this thing that then goes onto our Google Drive? Like, which CRM did you choose? Like, should I have used Salesforce? And I think it's a real shame. Like, so just encourage everyone really, if you're in a small group of like-minded peers in like-minded organizations, to just add some time in to say, right, what are you doing with digital? Where are you? What are you doing with data? What are you stuck on? I use this, what do you use? Because I think it's really valuable, and I think that could avoid some of the traps that some people are falling into. And I've spoken to charities this week who've been like, we moved to Salesforce and it's been absolutely amazing, like really revolutionized and changed our organization. And I was speaking to some other charities the week before saying, oh, if only we hadn't moved to Salesforce all those years ago. And actually, like, it's causing us loads of bother with like paying to tweak the reports and tailor them. We don't have the skills in house, and it's really mixed messages. So it's good to kind of, if you could create space to share that with colleagues that you trust and know are skilled in your area, or create a network. I'm the data lead, you're a data lead, let's have a nice time. I think it could actually really help a lot of organizations move forwards.
Yeah, that's really good advice, Nissa. I think leaning on some of your local networks that exist already to support some of this stuff, because I mean, I think, you know, third sector interfaces, CVXs, whatever setup you have in your local area should be leading on a lot of this. And if they're not, it's maybe leaning on them to kind of how do we pull together that group of people and what does that look like? Because 9 out of 10 times the thing you're trying to solve, someone else has solved it, and probably someone else within your own network has solved it. And what we want to avoid is that thing that Catherine mentioned, where we're kind of at the whim of a consultant overselling and overpromising, and possibly never really quite delivering. And you can start untangling big, expensive spends years down the line as a result of that. So I think that's really good advice. Thanks. We've still got a few more minutes. We've probably got time for another question if anyone wants to jump on, or any thoughts, reflections. Well, can we finish up a wee bit early? I think I probably I was just going to quickly finish up with just saying thanks to Catherine and Nissa for sharing those insights today, and just urging everyone to go and look at the Charity Digital Skills Report and using it as a starting point for conversations, because for me that's probably where it's most powerful, is actually thinking, you know what, we've never assessed the digital skills of our staff team, or actually we don't have anyone who's leading on this from a governance perspective. Or the way that we communicate and collaborate isn't conducive to actually making quick decisions about digital and what our service users need. Or we don't have any kind of way of embedding service design processes because we've never actually thought about it, and there's no structure in our organisation around it. So what are those prompts within the Digital Skills Report that are going to help you think about where you need to make changes in your organisation? I just say as well, Nissa's put the feedback form in there, so you can tell her anonymously if you've got any feedback, if there's anything else. You're going to be on maternity leave soon, Nissa, as well. That's exciting. Congratulations. Polly's jumped in with a very last one, which I've only got 3 minutes left, Polly. Now, can I cover cybersecurity in 3 minutes? What you want from me?
I just think it's critical, and it's a way of kind of making sure that people, about building people's confidence online, and that's what they're worried about. They're worried about being scammed as workers as well as us, and we need to be more conscious of it, especially small charities. We will be targeted, and you know, so it's what our plans are to do that. I'm building a training thing with a cyber network here in the Midlands, but I'd be just interested to hear if anybody else is planning anything. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, George just put some stuff in the chat. So the SSC, I've got some stuff that they're planning for health and social care charities. It's useful. Siobhan's one there about the National Cybersecurity Centre, 30-minute training sessions. They also have a really good infographic, which I've encouraged a lot of boards to use, which has got like the kind of 10 building blocks of a cybersecurity plan, and it's a really good way of sense checking, like on these 10, where are we in each of these kind of core areas. I think the SCDO site's got some other jumping off points to other cybersecurity resources within there as well. George, did you want to come in just in some of the resources you're developing?
Yeah, just on the cybersecurity front, we're also running these, I don't know if anyone's heard of them, exercise in a box sessions, where we sort of simulate a cyber attack, and you get all the right folk around the table and say, right, if this was to happen, what would you do? It's a really powerful exercise. It's all about preparing for when something like this happens rather than if, because I'm sure we don't need to single out organisations, but there have been some fairly high profile ones recently. So that's an offer from the SSC.
Brilliant, that's amazing, George. Thank you. That's really good. Yeah, it's probably a good place to finish. So we will be back in, I think it's 26th of October, Matt, isn't it? 10 a.m. to 11. You'll be able to book the next DigiShift soon on the SCVO events page. Just keep your eyes peeled for that. As I said, we've got our next Digital Trustees event coming up soon. We also have, as part of the curve, we've got free training. So the ones we've got this week on data dashboards and analytics. We've got some stuff coming up on online fundraising as well. And again, that's part of the kind of wider Catalyst network stuff that's going on at the moment. Maddie, anything from SCVO that you want to kind of update on? Other stuff that we should know?
No, I think we're all good. Well, Sean has just asked the last question of George. Is that a free offer, the exercise in the box? And I think it is. and it's on the cybersecurity website. I always get that wrong, but it is. But yeah, do you want to get in touch with George?
There we go. Brilliant. Right, thank you so much. Thanks, Nissa. Good luck with your maternity leave.
Congratulations, Nissa.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks so much. That was great.
Thanks all.
Cheers. I'll hopefully see a lot of you next month.